memories entwine and weave all my hopes and aspirations, all my longings, woes aside. Everlasting bonds surround us as the fleeting years roll by. My Guyana time's unfolding, more and more my destiny to reach in lasting splendor that the years have brought to me. All the ashes of my glory, oh, the long, long night has passed. Oh, rise triumphant, glorious, from the ashes of the past. Oh, rise triumphant, glorious, from the ashes of the past.
Here we go. Oh, good morning to members of the media and the general public. I also welcome you to this Working People's Alliance press conference. With me on the panel this morning are two WPA co-leaders, Rohit Kanai and Takuma Ogunse. I will start by presenting the party's statement. Then we'll have presentations by the other two panelists, and then we'll take questions from the media. WPA wishes to remind the nation that it intends to contest the upcoming election as part of a grand coalition or by itself. Towards this end, it has begun preparation of its manifesto and related tasks. Our platform would center on the following plans. 1, equitable distribution of revenues garnered from oil resources. 2, empowerment of the poor and the powerless through poverty alleviation measures such as statutory cash transfers. 3, improved access to education, including universal literacy. 4, universal health care as a human right. 5, constitutional reform aimed at democratization of governance and electoral integrity. 5, diversification of the economy to avoid over-dependence on oil and gas. 6, eradication of extrajudicial killings. 7, restoration of collective bargaining and improved wages and salary as a guaranteed right to life. 7, protection of women from the inhumane imperatives of the market, including the labor market. 8, a political solution that ensures paths to racial harmony and racial justice. 9, a robust regional CARICOM component to socio-economic development. And 10, revision of all contracts and attendant instruments as they relate to oil and gas. Coalition talks with the PNC-APNU were paused pending the APNU-AFC negotiations. We intend to resume those talks shortly. WPA intends to place a common policy program and electoral strategy at the top of the agenda. Our approach to coalition talks would be guided by fraternalism, independence, and realism. As regards the top of the ticket, WPA intends to stick with the formula adopted at the 2011, 2015, and 2020 elections, whereby the presidential candidacy is occupied by the party with the potential largest electoral reach and capacity. Similarly, the latter party would be accorded the largest portion of the list of candidates, potential parliamentary seats, and cabinet ministers should the coalition win. WPA would not seek to influence who the other party or parties put up as their standard bearers. Similarly, WPA reserves the right to determine who represents our party in the positions awarded to us. Even as WPA prepares for the election, we continue to believe that the implementation of biometrics and the sanitization of the current voters list are critical to the integrity of the election. Since the PPP majority at GCOM has closed the door on these requests by the opposition, we call on the international community, including CARICOM, to lend their voices and influence to push the PPP to reverse course. The events of the last few weeks have confirmed WPA's worst fears about the dangerous direction in which our country is headed. WPA's repeated calls on the government to change course have fallen on deaf ears. It is therefore not surprising that not a day passes without some disturbing incident that threatens to push the country over the edge. From the brazen murders by the state of 2 young men at Linden and the mysterious death of young Adriana Young, to the rounding up of scores of young men under the guise of terrorism, to the arrest of a young nurse for a private voice note, and that of a rapper for singing a song that is insensitive to the Hindu community. The dooms are varied, but the impact have been the same. The PPP government has brought Guyana once again to the brink of a national explosion. The constant assault on the rule of law, repeated human rights violations, untamed corruption, open racial discrimination, routine extrajudicial killings, and the mismanagement of the economy have combined to make Guyana the most autocratic state in the Anglophone Caribbean. While billions of dollars pour into the government coffers, thanks to the oil windfall, the country's poverty rate has risen to one of the highest in the region. It was therefore not surprising that on the night of April 28, 2025, the country literally and figuratively exploded. Only the government seemed surprised. The initial police response to the disappearance of Adriana Young was the straw that broke the proverbial camel's back. The lying by the regional command of the police force has led the government down a path of inevitable cover-up, accompanied by a reign of terror, which have combined to render the country unstable. WPA contends that given the enormous security and intelligence apparatus at its disposal, it is almost impossible for the police and the government to be unaware of the circumstances surrounding Adriana's death. Only recently, attorney and AFC leader Nigel Hughes revealed the presence of mega satellites on the country's shoreline, a revelation that the WPA has since confirmed. The powers that be are clearly protecting the guilty person or persons. The single-minded rush to rely on the findings of the autopsy regarding the cause of death only heightens popular belief that the government is determined to script a premature closure to the issue. WBA therefore calls on the government to come clean. Come clean. Come clean. The stability of the country hangs in the balance. The longer this mystery persists, the government's legitimacy irreparably suffers. When people lose confidence in the ability of a government to guarantee the basic safety and welfare of its citizens, the social compact between the governors and the governed is severely eroded. When a critical mass of people perceives the government to be in bed with powerful and nefarious forces against the interests of the powerless, democratic breakdown beckons. WPA salutes Adriana's family for resisting the cajoles of the government to acquiesce to what would have amounted to an endorsement of a cover-up of the death of their loved one. The family has in effect torpedoed the government's customary, disgusting playbook of bribing families of victims into silence. WPA hopes this brave stance by the Young family opens a new chapter in the cause of justice in Guyana. WPA condemns in the strongest terms the government's response to the popular uprising that has accompanied Adriana's death, which must be seen as part of a larger reaction to official abuse of power. The rounding up of scores of young men by the police on terrorism charges represents the most flagrant abuse of power by a post-colonial government. Since when looting and robbery constitute public terror or terrorism? WPA does not condone looting and robbery from any quarter, including by the government. But we cannot endorse terrorism charges as the appropriate government response. Such a response represents persecution as a substitute for prosecution, and injustice as a substitute for justice. The subsequent ridiculous arrest and charge of a young nurse for allegedly lying about her presence at the site of Adriana's autopsy reeks of the overbearing squalor of government viciousness against the poor and the powerless. Similarly, the arrest of the rapper Baby Skello for singing a song with lyrics which are offensive to the Hindu community is nothing short of government spitefulness. Offensive lyrics are a staple on the landscape of Guyana's popular culture and should be moderated. But jailing artists is not the appropriate form of moderation. WPA therefore calls on the government to withdraw the terrorism charges against the young men and institute charges which correspond with the allegations against them. We also call on the authorities to withdraw the charges against the young nurse. That young lady should be home, taking care of her children, and furthering her employment as a nurse. Further, we call on law enforcement to leave Baby Skello alone. Guyana is not a theocracy. Finally, we call on the judiciary to stand up for the rule of law and the supremacy of the Constitution. Do not become party to public persecution. The primary role of the judiciary is to interpret the law and the Constitution and to dispense justice in an even-handed way while serving as a check on the overreach of the other two branches of government. The government's attempt to blame the opposition for the protests is equally dangerous. The Attorney General is on record threatening to harm a WPA leader. WPA takes that threat very seriously and once again alerts the nation that the not so hidden objective of the government is to silence dissent in Guyana and to use the discredited police and the weapon of political assassination to achieve its objective. This is not the first time that the Attorney General has publicly threatened to harm his political opponents. WPA is exploring its options in regard to the AG's threat against his member. But for now, we warn the government that its ready resort to state force and state violence as the answer to free speech and dissent is not sustainable and only serves to heighten socio-political disorder and instability. We also wish to let the AG and the government know that as a party, we would not cower in the face of threats. Our activists would continue to confront government excesses and brutality. If the Guyana police force had any credibility before Adriana's death, that credibility has swiftly evaporated in the weeks following the discovery of her body. For the WPA, the Guyana police force is beyond simple band-aids and tinkering. It is a system that must be uprooted. The rot in that institution has consumed the entire security landscape and apparatus. the police force is no longer capable of discharging its mandate to serve and protect the citizenry. It has become a cancer in the system that needs to be cured if our country is to live as a free and democratic society. It is a clear and present danger to stability, peace, justice, and democratic order. Against this background, WPA proposes a complete overhaul of the institution as we know it. First, the institution must be immediately depoliticized. Towards this end, we propose the immediate resignation or removal of those who occupy the current leadership and command structure of the force. Their replacements must be approved by the Police Service Commission and confirmed by a 2/3 vote in the National Assembly. The Police Service Commission itself must be disentangled from the clutches of the political executive. Second, the leadership of the institution must be mandated to make frequent appearances before a select committee of the National Assembly to report on developments in the institution. Third, members of the institution at all levels must undergo rigorous training in modern policing with the aim of vastly improving its efficiency. Such training must not be confined to traditional areas of policing, but should be broadened to include the country's history, sociology, and related areas such as human rights and the Constitution. The University of Guyana should be involved in this exercise along with other institutions. Fourth, the long-awaited name change of the institution to read the Guyana Police Service must be implemented without delay. As recent as last December, the Commission of Police promised the country that the name change was imminent. Today, we say change the name of that institution without delay. Fifth, even as these changes are being carried out, WPA recommends that there should be a committee of experts along with members of the National Assembly, and that this committee should begin a fact-finding mission across the country to hear from the communities about the problems and their proposed changes to the institution. It is the people in their community who have been the major victims of the misuse of power by the police, and their views must be at the top of the heap when it comes to overhauling the police institution. Finally, a zero-sum approach to corruption must be implemented immediately. An anti-corruption unit comprised of reputed ex-police officers, legal experts, and other anti-corruption and human rights experts not related to the police should staff this unit. As part of the anti-corruption initiative, the wages and salaries of members of the institution must be upgraded to the level of their regional counterparts. WPA feels that tying improved wages to the anti-corruption initiative is imperative. Thank you very much. That was the statement by the WPA. I now call on my colleague Rohit Kanai for his comments, and then we'll go to Brother Takuma Ogunse. You have to unmute yourself, Rohit.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Hines. We are all living in very troubling times. One of the sacred rights and the natural right of all people is to oppose, by any means necessary, tyrannical government. This is enshrined in almost every constitution. What a constitution demands of people is that you exhaust the institutions that allow you to exercise your fundamental rights. When people lose faith in those institutions, out of sheer necessity, they will and must rely on extra parliamentary methods to regain the rights that the very government that is supposed to protect those rights violates the very rights they're supposed to protect. The people have no other resort than to step outside of the Constitution to ensure their sacred natural rights of self-preservation. The Attorney General, Mr. Nandlal, boasted that as early as 2002, the PPP government had put in place the very charges into the Constitution of deeming people terrorists. He said this in a recent press conference when he made the claim that the Guyana government had anticipated by almost 20 years what is currently being debated among the Caribbean government in terms of terrorism laws. Whilst the Attorney General made it appear that this was forward thinking, in effect, it was the very opposite. It was backward thinking, that they were preparing these laws to hold in advance, which they recently exercised, when a natural, spontaneous outburst by the masses against what they termed injustice, a gross injustice and failure of the institution, in this case, the police force, to at least make justice appear to be done, has been violated. The Vice President, Mr. Jagdeo, in a recent press conference, said that the government sets principles. It is for the administrative bodies to carry out those principles. Yet, Dr. Jagdeo, in referring to the Mohammed case, claimed that people with money are able to subvert the justice system. The natural question becomes, what is the role of the government in setting principles when those principles are violated to ensure that this matter is corrected? So there's a huge disparity when we look at the administration of justice that the government must guarantee is not seen by sectors of this population which is aggrieved, and in this specific case, that of the young child, that the Attorney General and the state, by extension, can deem citizens terrorists and engaged in terrorism. That is for exercising their right to natural justice. This is a serious matter, and it encompasses all the issues we have grappled with in our press release. I will stop there. Thank you.
Tukumo?
Okay, good morning, members of the media and those who are viewing the press conference from various social media platforms. While the WPA is preparing to participate in the elections, we want to reiterate our previous position that we stated that the party is open to a postponement of the election date to facilitate biometrics and a clean voters list so that we could have a level playing field and an environment that all contesting parties could be satisfied with. So we haven't buy into the argument that we are bound by the present timeline that is spelled out in the Constitution and the law. We feel that this is a political matter, and as we call on CARICOM and the international forces to throw the weight on the side of fairness and Guyanese democracy, the party wants to reiterate that we are willing to struggle and to convince the country that it's better to accept a delay elections by a few months to facilitate biometrics and the clean voters list and a level playing field. The next observation is not reflected in the WPA statement, but I think, and the WPA feels, after reflection, we have already written the statement, that we cannot ignore the fact that recently there have been news of at least 2 explosions, one at the East Rheinfeld police station and one at the GPL substation. And we also note within that time frame, relative time frame, there was a destruction of a nursery then controlled by the city council by fire. The WPO wants to put on record that we are paying close attention to these developments. And we ask the question, which political force in the country at this particular point in time have an interest in creating an atmosphere of terror in the country to support their politics and their declaration? We are suspicious and very apprehensive on these matters. And in our judgment, the government hung its condemnation of the opposition on the accusation that the opposition is supporting terror and terrorism in the country. And from our observation, that was designed mainly probably for international consumption and locally among its support base. But our candid assessment is that the policy has failed, and the government have recognized that it has failed, that no international force of any reputableness have shown any interest in the government's argument about terrorism based upon those charges of looting, etc. And we are suspicious that the rulers may, and we are waiting patiently for the discredited police force to give us more information on these matters. But as a political party, we cannot rule out the possibility that those who feel at this point that they need to make a comeback in terms of the propaganda war over the present situation in the country needs to create an atmosphere of real terror and real acts of terrorism. And we are very apprehensive. I stop there.
Thank you very much, Brother Rohit Kanai and Brother Takumo Ogonse. We'll now open it up to the media for questions. Of course, you media members know the protocol, the institution or media house that you represent. Are there any questions? No? No? I notice Guyana Standard is here. Kiana, any questions?
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions from anyone of the media in the chat section? No? No? Is there any other comment that any member of the panel would like to make? No? If not, we will just like to reiterate the points that we made in the press release and our comments. We know that it's a lengthy press release because there are a number of burning issues that we have to comment on. We did not deal in any way with the recent attacks on our soldiers at the border. We wish to say that the WPA condemns very strongly the brazenness of Venezuela. We have no doubt that the Venezuelans are monitoring our internal problems and they're taking advantage of it. We in the WPA were, of course, scandalized by the fact that while our young men were being shot at the border, members of our government at the very top, including the president, were having parties in Georgetown. And ironically, they were playing some of the very lewd songs that they seem to be taking rappers and other singers to task. I myself observed them partying to Gimme Punani, Wan Punani, and we know that song as someone who has studied lyrics of Caribbean music. We know that the imagery in that song has to do with the private parts of mainly Black women. And the president and other members of his cabinet and party were very comfortable dancing to lyrics that were offensive, that are offensive to African women, but were very quick to arrest a young man whose lyrics were equally offensive to Indian womanhood. One knows that an artist or a human being cannot have sex with a goddess. You know, Lakshmi there is used as a symbol of Indian womanhood. The abuse in the lyrics is really the abuse directed at Indian womanhood. And the point I'm making is that the lyrics in Punani is a similar abuse on African womanhood. And there we have a government that arrested a young man for abusing Indian womanhood in his song, dancing and carrying on to a song that abuses African womanhood at the time when mainly African soldiers were being shot at the border. WPA calls again on this government, stop playing around with this border issue. It is a clear and present danger, and the country must be put on that footing. We agree with the opposition leader not to be used as a football whenever this issue raises its head. We agree with Mr. Norton that the opposition must not be used whenever the government wants to give a sham show of national unity while turning its back on real national unity. And so we call on this government again to treat the Venezuelan issue as a serious issue and to sit down with the opposition in a serious way to work out a comprehensive defense of our country, not only on the border, but defense of our democratic integrity. One day, the vice president says no to power sharing. The other day, he wants to sit down with the opposition to condemn Venezuela. Well, that is power sharing. And you cannot cherry pick power sharing. If you're saying that there is need for trust before you share power with the opposition, then why not the opposition saying there's need to trust before you can sit down with us to have a common position against Venezuela? And that is the dilemma we find ourselves in. We have a government that has shut the door on any sharing of power beyond cosmetic, while at the same time, when its back is against the wall, it wants the opposition to sit down and take photo ops. WPA is totally against that. We say, as we have said in our press release today, that the WPA feels that there's need for a political solution in Guyana. Regardless of the oil and gas, regardless of how much money we have, regardless of how many bridges and roads we build, if they are not bridges and roads, if we don't build lasting bridges and roads between and among our ethnic communities, our country will not be truly developed. I want to repeat that. If we do not build lasting bridges and roads among and between our ethnic communities, our country is going nowhere. We just have to look across at Haiti, our sister country in the Caribbean, and to see when the legitimacy of government, is tarnished, then mob rule takes over. And we do not want that for our country. So I just wanted to make those comments. In closing, we would like to thank the media and to thank the general public for attending our press conference, and those of you in the general public for listening. Until next week, when we come back again for another press conference, we would like to say thank you. One more thing before we go. The WPA will be holding a justice rally on Independence Day on May 26th. We'll be staging a justice rally at Buxton to continue to up the pressure on the government for an impartial investigation into the death of Adriana Young, and to ensure justice for our family and justice for the community at large. So we'll be holding on Independence Day a justice rally, justice for Adriana, justice for Keon Fojane, whose killer has not been charged yet, justice for Ronaldo, whose alleged killer has been charged, but we know that in the past they've charged people and justice was never delivered. And so it's a justice rally for all the victims of extrajudicial killing, all the victims of government neglect and cover-up. It's a WPA rally, but we have written to members of opposition parties and civil society to share the platform with us as we continue to build the pressure in the country for justice for those who have been deprived of that vital and important component of the human family, and that is justice for those who've been deprived. Thank you all very much.